Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Antonio. Good to have you back. Yesterday I read a story about an older couple who were at a diner that they went to once a week for years. The husband's name was Paul, and he was looking at his wife, Elaine, and he noticed that her sweater was inside out. And he had been laying her clothes out for her in order and how she should put them on because she had Alzheimer's for a number of years. He realized he had to kind of maybe pay a little more close attention to that. And as they were sitting there waiting for the waitress, Elaine was trying to scrub a stain off the table, a stain that had been there for years. The waitress came over and said, "Hey, so good to see you, Paul and Elaine. Are you going to have the usual?" And he said, "Yes, we are, but today is a special day. You need to know it's a special day. It's our 57th wedding anniversary." And he said, 57 years ago, this beautiful woman here took a chance on a broke, balding man. And here we are. And so the waitress said, "Well, congratulations, and we just made some key lime pie, so we'll be sure to save you a couple pieces and give them to you on the house for an anniversary gift as you leave." And Elaine's still working on the table, trying to get that spot off. And the waitress says, "Do you want the usual, the Cobb salad and tomato soup?" And he says, "Yes, and here's your sweet tea." And the waitress starts walking away and comes back, and she says, "Oh, I forgot, we're out of tomato soup. We just ran out. But we've got chicken noodle." And Paul says to Elaine, "Honey, they're out of tomato soup. Do you want chicken noodle?" And she starts crying. And he says, "Well, how about a sandwich? How about something else?" And he shows her the menu, and she's just crying and working furiously on that spot on the table. And he says to the waitress, "I think we ought to just go." And here he throws a 10 on the counter, and the waitress says, "It's okay, let me pack up a couple pieces of pie for you, bring them out to your car." And Paul tries to help his wife out to the car, and they get settled. And on the way home, Elaine keeps asking Paul, "What day is it? What day is it?" And he says, "It's Wednesday." "Well, what day is it?" "It's Wednesday." And he knew what she was getting at because he had mentioned their anniversary, but he didn't want to upset her anymore because he knew that she had forgotten. And to him, he knew she had Alzheimer's, and so it wasn't a big deal. And so after the third time of him asking him what day it was, he says, "It's January 7th. And she says, "It's our anniversary." And he said, "Yes, it is, honey." They got into the house, and he got her settled, put a TV tray in front of her, turned on The Price is Right, went into the kitchen to look for some tomato soup. And as he's in the kitchen, everything's labeled, cupboards with plates, bowls, spoons, because she wanted to stay independent as long as she could. But she could no longer do the cooking. So he got in the cupboard and found a can of tomato soup, grateful that he found a can of tomato soup, and put it in the bowls. And as he was warming it up in the microwave, he heard piano playing from the living room. They always had a piano in their house because she was a music teacher. And he walks into the room, and she's playing Canon in D, which was his favorite song. He sits down at the bench next to her and watches her hands from muscle memory, just playing Canon in D. And he starts crying, and she stops and finishes the piece, and he says, "That's my favorite song." And she said, "I know." And as he's holding her hand and kissing her fingers, he says, he's imagining her walking down the aisle in a white dress, carrying some yellow daisies from their garden, because they wanted a simple service. And he says, "Happy anniversary, honey." And she's, "Happy anniversary, Paul. I love you." He goes, "I know you do." He goes, "And I love you." He goes, "Now how about some tomato soup?" And she says, "I really like chicken noodle." I love that story. I mean, it's, funny at the end, but because it's a choice to love. It's a choice to stay with someone 57 years. It's a choice because life isn't always easy. It's a choice to love someone. And it takes courage to choose to love, to show up. Tuesday is Valentine's Day. And it's a great day to celebrate love, any kind of love, not just romantic love, but any kind of love. We should celebrate love. Love. We need it right now. There's so much hatred and anger and finger pointing and divide, and it takes courage to choose love in the middle of all that, in the middle of a storm. So stories such as this older couple at the diner that they went to are so heartfelt, so beautiful, because we remember that love is always possible. Love is always a choice. It's always there. Especially in this time of political polarization and ongoing pandemic recovery, to remember love is available, especially when we're stressed and divided. Tonight, a third of the country will watch the Super Bowl. About 100 million Americans will tune in to the Super Bowl, and some of them just for the commercials, right? How many just for the commercials? They're usually great commercials. Tonight is different with the commercials because there's going to be 2 Jesus ads. Did you know that? There can be 2 Jesus ads, and it's called He Gets Us. It's a campaign, He Gets Us. It started last spring, trying to bring more awareness to Jesus. And it's appealing to younger people. It's appealing to those that are spiritually open or spiritually curious. And it's bringing a message of hope and compassion and love to a society that is feeling stressed out from the last few years. This message of unconditional love is so important. There was a study that Barna did that 75% of people say they want to grow spiritually, and almost half of people say they want to get to know Spirit or God more since the pandemic. The time is ripe for spirituality, for spiritual principles, for us to get deeper and look at these things in our lives. People are more open to learning about God. And teens are especially interested in learning more. But I don't want to trigger you with Jesus talk. I know some of you get really triggered when we talk about Christianity or Jesus. And in unity, just to be clear, in unity, we don't worship Jesus. We respect him, we appreciate his teachings, we consider him our way shower, our brother, somebody, instead of he gets us as if he's still here, he got humanity during his lifetime. He was a man that lived 2,000 years ago, and this is what unity teaches, that he showed us how to live a spiritual life in a tough time, during a difficult time. How to live beyond our comfort zones, how to step out, how to choose love over fear, how to choose love with courage. It took courage for Jesus to speak out against in the political landscape that he lived in with the Romans, to upset the apple cart. It took courage. He was showing them a different way of living, a different way of being that brought more joy, more peace, more love. In the world of finger pointing and blaming and shaming, we need this message of love because the blaming is happening everywhere, even in our spiritual centers. Unfortunately, I've heard people comment, how could this stuff be happening in our spiritual center? Aren't we spiritual people? Can't we just love each other and forgive and move on? How can this be happening here? Well, we don't live in a bubble. Here in Boulder, here at Columbine is not a bubble. We are a gathering place of people, and guess what? People bring their stuff with them. They bring their stuff. I bring my stuff. You bring your stuff. We all bring our stuff. And so there's going to be conflict at times. There's going to be drama at times. There's going to be stuff that happens. And it's so easy to get wrapped up in it. But the invitation is to choose love, to have the courage to choose love. It's our true nature, love. It's what we're made of, love. It's who we are, love. We're love. And it takes so much less energy to love than it does to hate. A lot less energy. And you'll sleep better when you choose love. Don't we all need a little more sleep? Ernest Holmes says this: love is within us. It cannot be destroyed. It can be ignored. To the extent that we abandon love, we will feel it has abandoned us. Denying love is our only problem, and embracing it is our only answer. Through the power of love, we can let go of past history and begin again. Love heals, forgives, and makes whole. Love heals. We're going to have a healing ceremony here on March 12th. We're bringing in a minister, a transitional minister, unity minister from Unity Worldwide Ministries, and he'll be here. His name is Steve Colliday. He'll be here on March 12th after the service. He'll give the talk and then do a healing ceremony. I hope most of you will stay for that. Love heals. Love heals. In the late 1800s, there was a man born, his name was Star Daly. He grew up in an abusive home, abandoned by his alcoholic father, abandoned emotionally, abused physically, abused verbally, taunted at school, became filled with hatred. And of course, that led to a life of crime. And he was a bank robber. He became known as a really good safe cracker. He was arrested twice as a teenager. He wanted people to feel intimidated by him. He wanted people to be afraid when he walked in the door. When he was in his early 20s, he was arrested for the third time. And he was so filled with hate that he just fought with everybody in prison. It got so bad that they had to put him in solitary confinement, which back in those days was not what it is now. He would be in an 8 by 8 foot cell. At 6 a.m., his hands were handcuffed to a bar above his head. His feet were handcuffed or cuffed to the bottom bar. And he would be like that for 12 hours. When he would be released at 6 p.m. from the handcuffs and given some bread and water. And he was consumed with hate towards his guards, towards his jailer, towards the judge that sentenced him. He had like 20 years. He'd been sentenced to 20 years. After about, not clear how long, maybe 10 or 15 days, after he had been like this for 12 hours and been released, his legs were so swollen when they released him, he just fell to the floor, stone floor, given his bread and water. The jailer left him there like that, and Star Daly had a vision. This is a true story. Had a vision of Jesus. And Jesus he had a vision of Jesus stepping behind a stone, coming from behind a stone, and just looking at Star and projecting love. And he held eye contact with him, and he just had this love. So much love in this vision that Star felt the love, and it melted his hatred. He didn't say anything, but he started realizing there was a different way of being. There was a different way of being. He said it was like there was a plug at the bottom of his feet, and he unplugged it, and all the hatred just drained out of him. He started feeling love towards his jailers, towards the guards, towards the judge, towards his fellow prisoners. He was removed from solitary confinement and placed in a new cell, given some fresh clothes. And his cellmate was an older man who taught him the Bible. He said he only felt love. From that time forward, he only felt love. It was like something shifted in him. He started praying for his enemies, blessing them. He ended up getting released early, and he wrote 2 books. He swore he was never going to go back to his old ways, to his hatred, only love, projecting love. And everyone that he projected his love to converted. They all converted. The power of love. He wrote a book, which was his autobiography, called Released, and then he wrote another book called Love Can Open Prison Doors, which is on truthunity.net if you want to read it. I just read it over the weekend. It's fascinating how someone could be so filled with hate, and the power of love can shift it all from a vision. It changed his life by choosing love instead of hate. Changed his life. It takes so much energy to hold on to hate and resentment. Martin Luther King Jr. says this: "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear." That is too great a burden to bear. It takes so much energy. Yesterday, I watched The Chosen, Season 3, the season finale. Oh my God, it was powerful. It was so good. And there's so many Bible stories within that one episode. So Jesus had sent his apostles out 2 by 2, and so Andrew and Philip were sent, and they went to the Decapolis, it was called. It was a place where Jews and Greeks and Romans all lived, Gentiles all lived. And Andrew and Philip told the parable about the banquet where everybody sits at the same table. Well, people were appalled by that, and it caused fighting, and it caused a lot of conflict, and Jesus needed to come in and save the day. It turned out that ended up being the fishes and loaves story, feeding of the 5,000, that people came from all over. Jesus was there and speaking. And it's very powerful, but Jesus had to calm them down first. The Christ in us calms us down. The Christ in us, the Christ consciousness within us, which is in each one of us, is our calming center. It's where love dwells. And Jesus says several times during this episode, "Bring me your burdens, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." Not I, Jesus, but I, the Christ. the inner Christ within each one of us, can give us that rest we need. With love. With love. It's exhausting to hate. It's exhausting to have resentments and hold on to that, because we have to hold on to it so tightly. Because it's not our natural state. Our natural state is love. Our natural state is peaceful. I won't tell you, because I want you to watch it. I won't tell you what happens in this last episode, season 3. Can't wait for season 4, but it's going to be a while. But the love that is there, the love that is just oozing off the screen when Jesus heals a man and he puts his arm on his shoulder and says, I know you. And he didn't, know him, but I know you. I know you. You are a child of God. You are love itself. And the love that's in the end of this episode between Jesus and Simon Peter, and between Simon and his wife, Eden, is amazing. Amazing, because we can just imagine that love. Because it's within us. So we can relate to that. It was a letting go of blame. It was a letting go of resentment. And there was just pure love, a return to center, a return to what's important. And that's love. In the Christian scriptures, you probably all have heard the story of the adulteress who was condemned to be stoned to death. And Jesus stops them by saying, any of you who have not sinned, throw the first stone. And of course, they all, one by one, walk away. And Jesus says to the woman, are there no condemners here? Is there nobody here that condemns you? And she said, I guess not. And he said, well, then I don't condemn you either. Sin no more. Sin in unity is missing the mark. Missing the mark is being separate from our source, being separate from love, being separate from love's presence by hate. Sin no more. Don't be separate from spirit. Stay in that loving space as long as you can. There's a poem by Edwina Gately in the book Soul Sisters about this woman who was accused of adultery. It says, Soul sister, woman freed by grace, soften our eyes, melt our heart, and loosen from our fingers the stones we have gathered and stored in our souls. What stone are you carrying today? Is it meant for you or someone else? What's the intention with that stone? And can you feel yourself loosening those stones that you're carrying? You're invited to lay it down and choose love. Courage. It takes courage to let go of the hate. Are you willing to have the courage to do that? At the beginning of that episode of The Chosen, can I have that book? I forgot to bring that up here. Thanks. They show King David and his wife, and there's somebody reciting one of the Psalms to him, a new psalm that he had just written. And it's Psalm 77. And they recite it in the beginning of the episode, and then again at the end, we hear it. And this psalm is one where the speaker is filled with anguish, filled with doubt, filled with hatred, filled with just this sense of so much heaviness. And he says, my soul yearns to be comforted. And he works through it, as we have to do in our lives. Work through the stuff that comes up for us. Work through it and get to that place of love. Because at the end of this psalm, it's a perfect example of how we do this in life. How we bring our troubles to that inner self of ours, that higher self, that love that's within us, which can heal anything. And it says at the end of this psalm, you stand beside us as we walk through our fears to the path of wholeness and love. Though our footsteps are unsure, you send us the counselor as a guide to lead us on the road to peace, truth, and love. That's what we're invited to do. To know there is a comforter, not somebody outside of us, but within us. That comforter that can lead you to peace, truth, and love. May you find that within yourselves this week. Namaste.